guys, welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be covering the HOTA spec for a Barbarian. Now if most of you guys have tuned into the stream and seen me play my Barb, this is an amazing spec, so much fun to play. I'm literally in the background, you actually see me running through riffs, and I've been geared quite a bit since taking this footage a little bit, but the biggest thing about the HOTA build is it's very, very similar to the Whirlwind build. Matter of fact, it's so similar that there's only really a couple little nuances that you want to change. So let's go over talents real quick, go over what we're going to be taking. Obviously, cleave with broad sweep. Now, cleave with broad sweep, really, really good for clearing rifts, for clearing bounties, anything where you might get surrounded, you need to just run through things. You know, broad sweep hits a ton of targets for a ton of damage, and obviously we're stacking lightning damage with the way that this works. And obviously we're using the lightning hammer of the ancients. Okay, this is the most important spell. Obviously this is your main fury dump. This is what this build is really centered around, is spamming as many of these as possible because you're hitting like an absolute dump truck. That is one of the biggest things that you're going to see, is just some huge numbers. If you like big crits, stack some lightning damage, some crit hit damage, and then crit hit chance, and go to town. Okay, you're going to see a ton of damage coming out of this. Now, the other talents that we use are, I actually like to use, you know, the battle rage, the one where you get the damage buff, the battle cry. I like to use either war cry or threatening shout. Okay, I actually have used all three shouts, not at the same time obviously, but for different reasons. Mainly if I'm solo farming, I'll use the one that boosts my life a little bit, mainly for survivability and toughness. It seems to be really nice. However, with the Reaper Wraps, and Reaper Wraps being extremely important for this build for the primary resource generation, because obviously the job here is to spam Hammer of the Ancients as much as possible, right? So every time we run over a health globe, we get that primary resource back. So really nice to have those Reaper Wraps. You know, that's really the biggest thing, is making sure that you can really spam that as much as humanly possible. So because of that, Threatening Shout, actually not bad. I use the one that actually throws out health globes. So I actually get a lot of health globes, ends up really increasing my fury regeneration. I've actually loved the way that this build works. I've been using it for a while now, and for me, even in single target or group play, if we're in group play and there's no other Barbarian running you know, war cry, then I will use it just to help the group's toughness. But threatening shout's really strong, even in group play. But in single player, I've actually found that it works really well as well. So keep that in mind, that you can play around with both of those, see what you really like. Now, obviously, I do not have the iCase 4 set yet, so I do not have the ability to have the you know, the Call of the Ancients constantly up. You know, I don't have my little minions following me all over the place. I'm working on that. That is really nice for this build, obviously with the fury regeneration as well, because it really helps you get a ton more DPS out of this build. That is probably the one thing you really want, is you want to get that 4-set bonus on the IK set. Is going to be very important that you get that. Some Reaper Wraps, possibly if you can get a couple of Augilds pieces for that elite damage, you can find yourself farming T6 in no time, especially if you can get your hands on some good weapons. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. So that last talent spot, again, if you have your IK4 set, that's where you want to go with it. If you do not have your IK4 set, I've been using Ground Stomp, suck everything in. That way, the HOTA with the stun, the cleave with the broad sweep, I can really just pummel damage onto everything. Everything's in there, everything's doesn't know what to do, and I can really put out a ton of damage with that. So I really like that ability. That's really been awesome for me. I've really enjoyed playing with it. And then obviously you can use other talents, things such as sprint can work okay. As far as your single target cleave, if you're doing, you know, bosses, essentially, you know, you're really going through a lot of bosses, or you're doing some of the higher end rifts, and you have time to switch out talents between a boss fight. Obviously Frenzy with Smite, super awesome for boss encounters, especially rift bosses. You really can pummel a ton of damage. I'm also using Wrath of the Berserker. That's my main DPS cooldown, no matter what build it is. Wrath of the Berserker is pretty much my staple. That, 2 of the 3 cries, or 2 of the 3 shouts I should say, and then some kind of stun, suck in, some kind of ability until I get my Call of the Ancients 4 set. That's really what I'm using for this build. Now, as far as passives go, you know, this is where you actually have a little bit of leeway, okay? So you can use things like Ravage. You can use one where if you have 3 enemies or more, you get a huge damage buff. That's actually why I use Ground Stomp as well, so I constantly have that damage buff when I'm hitting things. Weapon Master is very good. The Fury Regen is really strong. I recommend having that for sure. And then obviously there's different things you can do to buff your toughness, buff group play, etc. So there's a lot of passive talents that, you know, some will do a little bit more damage than others, some will work a little bit more synergistically with this spec as well. But go through and see which ones work well for you, or which ones kind of fit your flavor a little bit. It's not really a set in stone group of them here, so you'll see what I'm using obviously at the beginning of the video, which is fine if you want to use those, but just to kind of throw out some other options out there. Now as far as gearing goes, okay, obviously for Paragon points real quick, in your core, I pretty much am going, obviously get your movement speed capped, and then I'm going pretty much all VIT. A lot of people, once they hit over 400, will actually max out their Fury regen and then start going, or their max Fury and then start going VIT. Obviously, more Fury equals more Hoda equals more damage, etc., etc. You can hold more, you can do more. It's really up to you how you want to play that, okay? After that, I've been going VIT mainly because, especially in the higher end torments, you need to be in the face of the enemy to really make this build work. So you're going to get hit. So the more life, the more toughness that you have tends to make you a little bit better off as the spec goes. Your damage is really, really strong anyway. Obviously, if you're group farming and you have somebody who can suck everything in and stun, and it's not you, then, you know, obviously strength might be really good for you along with max fury, depending on how many Paragon points you have. You know, in our next row, in our offense row, we're definitely going to be using crit hit damage, crit hit chance, and then attack speed, okay? The other two are far more important. In defensive, I use all res and armor, or all res and life. Both of those seem to have really, really good effects, so it's really up to you how you want to do it. And then, of course, in the last tier, resource cost reduction once life on hit is full. So life on hit's definitely going to be the most efficient one, and then after that is really up to you how you want to do it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can build your Paragon points with this build, just depending on how many you have. So keep that in mind as well. Gearing, like I said before, IK is super important to get your IK set. Ring of Grandeur is always nice. Reaper Wrap, super, super essential for this build. Depending on how you get your IKs, if you don't have it, the Leap Boots can also be effective in this build. Just so you know, the Leap Boots do have a place in this build if you can get them. I do not have them. Guilds, the 3-step bonus that gives increased damage to elites as well as really boosts your toughness against elites. I find that to be really, really strong, especially for the Barbarian running this build, mainly because of the fact that, like I said before, you're constantly getting hit. So the less things can hit you for, the more damage you're going to do, because the less you have to run away, etc., etc. It all, you know, snowballs downhill. So go ahead, take a watch for the rest of this riff, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this build. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below. I do want to cover one more thing real quick. I almost forgot. Is weapons. Weapons for this build. Pretty much in any order is, if you can get a really good Thunder Fury, Odin's Son, Shard of Hate, all three of those work incredibly well with the lightning damage from this build. You will see a ton of extra damage coming from those. Your helm and Dariel's, again, amazing, amazing helm if you can get some lightning damage on that. So keep that in mind as well. That's really what you're looking to get. Hope you guys like this video, and as always, see you in the next one.